Niner faithful. Just when you thought the Brandon Aiyuk chapter was finally closed and this organization could fully redirect its energy toward the championship pursuit at hand, the saga produced one more twist that deserves real attention. And simultaneously, something is happening in training camp that nobody was predicting before the pads went on. Something that could genuinely change how this defense operates and how this season unfolds in ways that the preseason projections did not fully account for. Let us break down both stories, because Day 11 of 49ers training camp delivered more genuinely significant news than any single practice week has any right to produce. Start with the Aiyuk grievance, because this represents the most consequential off-field development since his release, and it carries real financial implications that could meaningfully affect the cap flexibility this organization has heading into the trade deadline and the off-season that follows. The San Francisco 49ers have filed a formal grievance through the NFL's arbitration process, specifically aimed at recovering a portion of the guaranteed money paid to Aiyuk before and during the period of his contractual dispute with the organization. Matt Mayako's reporting had projected the recoverable amount somewhere in the range of $13.8 to $18.4 million, and the formal grievance filing confirms that the organization is genuinely pursuing that recovery rather than simply accepting the financial loss as the cost of resolving a complicated personnel situation. The specific legal basis for the grievance centers on Aiyuk's failure to fulfill the contractual obligations that the guaranteed money was conditioned upon, specifically the participation requirements in the team's rehabilitation program that the 49ers voided the remaining guaranteed money for in the first place. The arbitration process is going to require both sides to present evidence about the specific circumstances of his missed rehabilitation sessions, the team's notification protocols, and the contractual language governing what the guaranteed money was contingent on. This is not a slam dunk case for either side, and anyone who tells you with certainty how arbitration proceedings of this specific type resolve is either guessing or overstating what can be projected from the available public information. What this grievance filing tells you most clearly about the 49ers organization is the specific commitment to organizational accountability that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have built into how this franchise operates at every level. The easier path from a pure optics standpoint would have been to accept the financial loss, wave goodbye to Aiyuk, and present the departure as a clean, resolved chapter with no lingering entanglements. The harder path is filing a formal grievance, subjecting the organization to months of arbitration proceedings, generating continued media attention on a situation the fan base is tired of hearing about, and risking the possibility that the arbitrator rules against the team and produces a publicly unfavorable outcome. The 49ers chose the harder path because the organizational principle underlying it, that contractual obligations have real meaning and that players who fail to meet those obligations face real consequences, is the kind of standard that championship organizations enforce consistently rather than selectively. The Aiyuk response through his representation has been to contest the characterization of his rehabilitation conduct, suggesting the organization's account of his participation failures does not accurately reflect what actually happened. That counter-narrative is expected and is the standard legal posture for any party facing a formal grievance proceeding. The resolution of who is correct is going to take months through the arbitration process and may ultimately produce a partial recovery rather than the full amount the organization is seeking. But the filing itself is the meaningful organizational statement, and it has been made clearly and definitively. Now let us talk about what is actually happening on the practice field. Because the story developing in training camp over the past several padded practice sessions is genuinely one of the most exciting and genuinely one of the most surprising developments of this entire summer in Santa Clara. The surprise comes from a specific position group that the preseason analysis had not fully placed in the conversation about what would define this team's competitive ceiling in 2026. The secondary. Specifically, the combination of Diamador Lenoir, Upton Stout, and the rotating safety group that has been operating at a competitive level in padded practices that exceeds what the most optimistic preseason projections assigned to this unit. The specific evidence has been accumulating across every padded session since the pads went on. But Day 11 produced the most concentrated illustration of what this secondary is capable of when the scheme and the personnel are aligned correctly. Lenoir had 3 specific pass breakup moments in team period competition on Day 11 that each reflected a different dimension of what makes him genuinely valuable as an outside cornerback. The first was pure athleticism, breaking on a route at the exact moment the receiver made his final break and arriving at the ball with the timing and the physical commitment to disrupt the catch without the penalty that disrupting well-thrown passes typically requires. The second was anticipation, reading Brock Purdy's eyes and his release early enough to be in the throwing lane before the ball arrived rather than reacting to the ball in flight. And the third was physicality at the line of scrimmage, disrupting the receiver's release into the route with the kind of press coverage engagement that requires a specific combination of hand technique, leverage understanding, and competitive toughness that cannot simply be schemed into existence. 3 different skills in 3 separate pass breakup situations in a single practice session is genuinely exceptional performance for any defensive back in any training camp environment. Upton Stout's Day 11 training camp performance produced the specific evidence that Fred Warner had been publicly promising would arrive for the past several months. Stout was outstanding in nickel coverage situations in padded team period competition, specifically demonstrating the anticipatory read of route combinations that Warner had identified as his most rapidly developing skill throughout this offseason. The specific play that generated the most visible coach reaction on the defensive sideline was a nickel coverage assignment against a running back releasing out of the backfield in a pass route where the specific backfield motion had been designed to create a late identification challenge. For the slot defender, Stout identified the route early enough to position himself correctly before the ball was released, made the catch point play with the kind of confident physical commitment that reflects genuine preparation rather than reactive improvisation, and came down with the ball cleanly. One play in one padded practice does not confirm the breakout that this organization is projecting for him. The accumulation of plays across every padded practice session is beginning to confirm it. The safety room produced its own Day 11 highlight when Jair Brown, who has been one of the specific question marks the preseason analysis identified at the position, made a play in a team period that suggested the concern about this position group may be somewhat more overstated than the early coverage suggested. Brown read a seam route from a tight end in team period competition, identified the route early enough to drive downhill toward the anticipated catch point rather than simply reacting to the completion, and made a physical tackle for minimal gain that prevented what would have been a significant yardage gain in a game situation. The play was not spectacular. It was correct, which is the specific competitive standard that safety play in Brian Flores' scheme rewards and that the preseason analysis had wondered whether Brown was capable of meeting consistently. The offensive side of Day 11 continued the outstanding Brock Purdy and Mike Evans connection that every padded practice session has been adding to. The specific element of their connection that Day 11 revealed most clearly was Evans's willingness to create vertical separation in a genuine competitive padded context against cornerbacks who are specifically preparing for his game. Evans does not simply win against inferior competition or in favorable coverage looks. He wins in contested situations against cornerbacks who know his route tendencies and are aligned and positioned specifically to contest his most effective routes. Day 11 produced 2 specific team period instances where the coverage was clearly prepared for Evans's route concept, where the pre-snap alignment reflected specific film study of how he attacks that specific coverage, and where Evans found the specific adjustment within the route that the coverage had not fully accounted for. That kind of adaptability in a veteran receiver, the ability to find the adjustment when the coverage has correctly identified the primary concept. is the specific quality that separates receivers who are effective in the NFL from receivers who are elite. The George Kittle update from day 11 was the one that generated the most genuine organizational excitement. Kittle participated in the full padded team period competition for the second consecutive practice session. This time with the specific physical engagement of a padded tight end operating in genuine blocking assignment competition as well as receiving route competition. The blocking dimension of his padded practice participation is this individual competitive moment that represents the clearest available evidence of what this offense looks like when its best player is fully healthy and operating at his genuine ceiling. On a specific padded team period play action concept, McCaffrey received a handoff fake, sold the run to the second level with a kind of body commitment that genuinely occupied the linebacker's zone coverage responsibility, then released into the flat at the moment the linebacker committed to the run support. The completion was straightforward and well executed. What was extraordinary was the specific mechanism. McCaffrey's fake was convincing enough to genuinely change the linebacker's competitive behavior, creating the specific space that the play-action concept was designed to exploit. When a player's fake at the mesh point changes the linebacker's actual movement rather than simply appearing to momentarily distract him. The play-action has genuinely worked rather than simply being executed correctly, and McCaffrey is operating at that specific level of effectiveness right now. The Romelu height update from day 11 provided a specific, encouraging data point that suggests his adjustment from the first padded practice to the second and third is happening faster than the initial performance evidence suggested it would. He won a specific hand-fighting exchange in a one-on-one pass rush drill that he had been losing in similar situations in the first padded session. And the specific adjustment he made in his hand placement timing to account for what the offensive tackle had been successfully countering reflected the kind of rapid coaching absorption that Chris Kocherek's specific instruction is producing. The trust development in a young pass rusher happens incrementally through accumulated padded competitive experience. And day 11's specific hand-fighting improvement represents exactly the kind of incremental step that compounds into genuine production when the preseason games begin creating real game conditions. Kyle Shanahan's Day 11 press availability produced one specific comment that deserves real engagement from this fan base about the specific direction of his thinking heading into the preseason games. He said that the quality of competitive evidence being produced in these padded training camp sessions is the highest he has seen at this stage of training camp in his time with this organization. He was specific about what he meant by quality, not simply that good plays are being made, but that the competitive decisions underlying those plays reflect a level of system understanding and competitive maturity that typically takes this team another week or two of padded practice to reach. That specific observation from a coach who has presided over multiple deep playoff runs and a Super Bowl appearance carries real credibility about where this team's competitive readiness actually stands. Niner faithful, Day 11 delivered a Aiyuk grievance that confirms this organization's commitment to organizational accountability. A secondary performing at a level the preseason projections did not fully anticipate, and an offense with George Kittle back in full contact competition alongside Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, and Brock Purdy that is genuinely the most dangerous in the National Football League. Drop your reactions in the comments section right now. Does the formal Aiyuk grievance filing make you respect this organization's accountability standards more, or does it feel like unnecessary prolongation of a saga that should already be over? Is Upton Stout's training camp performance convincing you that this secondary is actually better than the preseason analysis suggested? And what is your bold prediction for how this 49ers season ends? Drop everything you have got below, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel because the preseason games are 2 weeks away and the regular season in Melbourne is right around the corner. Let's go Niners!